You and I were talking, Drew. You're a big fan of what Clemson has done in the high school ranks here in 2025, especially on the offensive line. I think you think they got a pretty good chance to sign the best offensive line class in the country. And Drew, sneaky good hire by Dabo Swinney, if you want to call it that. Matt Luke, man, getting it done in 2025.
Yeah, this is something that started to develop in the back of my head when we were in that 24/7 Sports war room last week, Cooper. I like what the early look of that offensive line class is for the Tigers. They just added Brandon Jacobs, a top 247 tackle, a few weeks ago. Well, I go to Orlando, right, for the Under Armour next camp series first stop. And this is going to sound weird, but I think the strongest position group in Orlando, remember it was Super Bowl Sunday, a lot of no-shows, was the offensive line. There was a handful of blue chip prospects there. And Cooper, what I thought was notable is a lot of these kids were talking about visiting Clemson. And one of the big reasons why is because of that new offensive line coach, Matt Luke. I think this is a hire that flew under the radar for Dabo. He goes outside of his coaching tree and brings in a veteran SEC coach that was at one time a sitting head coach. And I think Matt Luke is doing an excellent job of getting the Tigers involved with high-profile offensive linemen. So they got Brandon Jacobs committed, Easton Ware committed, Jalen Beckley committed, all right? Those three are in the boat. And remember, when you commit to Clemson, normally you're not looking around. Now, they're also going to get official visits in May from Zaire Addison, and Max Buchanan. Those were two of the top offensive linemen in Orlando. And Cooper, you can keep going down the list. David Sanders, number one ranked offensive tackle in the country. He has been a regular in Death Valley. That's the one I kind of have circled. All right. Can the Tigers get that one done? And there's a few other guys out there, Chauncey Goodwin and Mason Short, Mal Waldrip, Gavin Blanchard. The list is long. And I think it's important for Clemson. We always bring up the transfer portal. Dabo isn't going to go get veterans. How about this? The Tigers haven't signed more than 4 offensive linemen in a recruiting class since back in 2020. That's when they took 6 guys. I think they're volume shooting here, and this seems like a course correction for Mr. Swinney, realizing, all right, I got to get some big bodies in the building.
Drew, what's your feel on Clemson going forward? Because it's what's fascinating. I think me in particular, I've been pretty constructive of Dabo Swinney, and I think his reluctance to use the transfer portal, and I think a lot of people have, right? I mean, it's not for lack of that being publicized. His, I would say, limitations in terms of entering the transfer portal. That being said, he's made his bed. He seems very comfortable there in terms of recruiting the high school ranks. And then you look at what they've done. They hired Garrett Riley, kind of goes outside of what he has typically done in promoting internally. Hires Garrett Riley from TCU, hires Matt Luke, who had been out of the game, I believe, for a couple years. And Drew, now you look at Clemson, what they're getting done in this class. You and I, on the signing day show last week in Nashville, we just kind of kept talking about these guys, right? Guys like Christian Bentancur, guys like TJ Moore, guys like Bryant Wesco. Clemson just kind of kept coming up. They're doing a really good job in terms of the talent ID and evaluation. We know that they have a limited margin of error when it comes to high school. But, Drew, in terms of player development, in terms of experience, I don't know. Maybe it's not this year, but, 2 to 3 years from now, I could see Clemson all of a sudden similar to Michigan, it all accumulating at one point, and then Dabo Swinney finding himself in a really good spot that they haven't been in quite some time.
Well, think about it like this, Cooper. 2023 cycle was the defensive line haul, right? The Peter Woods, the TJ Parkers, they loaded up at that group. 2024 cycle, it was the pass catchers. You just said it, Benson Kerr, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore. We like all of those individuals. And now in 2024, it could be the offensive line. They're also doing a great job in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball. But you're right. I think they are kind of getting that roster the way it needs to be. Again, I think the Matt Luke hire is not being talked about enough. I know the coaching carousel keeps spinning, and there's a lot of moving pieces, guys jumping off to the NFL. But Matt Luke, I mean, he is someone that has a strong track record of developing these big athletic bodies. Greg Little, Laramie Tunsil, Broderick Jones, Amarius Mims. He was involved in all of those recruitments. So I guess I'm just saying I'm excited to see what this group can be for the Clemson Tigers. And David Sanders is the guy. I'm circling, all right? It takes a certain kid to want to go play at Clemson, kind of like with Notre Dame. We always bring that up. And to me, having spent some time around David Sanders, I do think he fits that kind of all-in vision there at Clemson.
Drew, are you surprised that Dabo Swinney hasn't used the portal, even with the public pressure kind of mounting?
I think he's waiting for it to, I don't know, for some guardrails to go in place and for it to go away. But the NCAA, from what we've seen so far, it's going the other direction. So, yeah, I'm a bit surprised, but he seems to be pretty stubborn about what his ways and doing it his way.
I'll tell you what, Drew. You mentioned Braden Jacobs, the son of Brandon Jacobs. You might remember that name. Played for the New York Giants there in a couple Super Bowls in the NFL. Drew, 6'7", 300 pounds plus. He almost has 11-inch hands. You look at this guy, a little bit raw coming in the season, transfers to Buford, left tackle, protecting Dylan Raiola. I turned on the tape today. This is a guy that I really like a lot. Big, physical kid that can move and play at the second level. He seems like he has grown into his body. I think the last time you and I saw him was in February, this time last year at the Under Armour camp in Atlanta, the same camp we'll be at this weekend. And I went back and I watched that combine tape today, and I was just like, man, this is a guy that just doesn't feel like he's in sync yet, right? He's still trying to figure it out in terms of he's got these long limbs and he's a really good athlete and the feet kind of feel a little bit sloppy. I turned on the tape today. I was a little bit wowed. I mean, I really like this kid. And Drew, I was kind of laughing and chuckling to myself because here we are talking about Matt Luke, who used to be at the University of Georgia, obviously the head coach at Ole Miss before that. He reminded me of a guy that we would see typically picked up by Kirby Smart, but I mean, you talk about Clemson, right, and the path to the field. A lot of these offensive linemen are going to have to play early. Drew, if that's the case, guys like Braden Jacobs make a lot of sense for what Clemson and Dabo Swinney need to get when it comes to their premium beef on the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I mean, I touched on it a little bit before, but how many kids back off pledges from Clemson? Like, normally once they commit, they do a good job of getting them, and I'm going to use the quotes here, all in. And so we'll see what it looks like. I think that May 31st weekend for the Tigers is going to be exciting. I mean, we're already getting a few names. That Zaire Addison kid just broke him down this morning. Watch one of his full games. I think he's got a ton of potential and can play inside, outside. Kind of reminds me similar of Elijah Thurman, who they just signed in the 2024 cycle. So I think Clemson is also doing a good job there of getting guys that aren't going to be pigeonholed into one spot. I think Matt Luke wants versatile bodies, and he's going to figure out how to get his best five. Now, if David Sanders were to pick the Tigers, I think you could pencil him in as the left tackle, and that allows Brandon Jacob to go play on the right side.
All right, we've almost gone 10 minutes on Clemson, but I wrote this in my notes, and I want to make sure that I mention it. Isaiah Campbell and Mari Adams, Drew. I have the audit for defensive line, point of attack players on defense. I watched these two, both committed to Clemson, both guys that we have in the top 247. I love these kids. And one from South Carolina, the other one from North Carolina. You talk about getting it done. Matt Luke, Nick Eason on the other side, defensive line coach. Clemson certainly getting it done at the point of attack. That travels. That's a big thing.